I refused to pay $74,000 for my brother's wedding. Now his ex is suing him for something. And then It started with an email that landed in my inbox on a lazy Tuesday morning while I was working from my kitchen counter, halfway through a mug of bitter coffee. I wasn't expecting anything interesting, maybe a newsletter I forgot to unsubscribe from, maybe another sales promo I delete without reading. But when I saw the subject line, the event of a lifetime, and noticed it was from my older brother Jackson, my gut twisted a little. I knew immediately that whatever it wasn't going to be simple. I clicked it open. The greeting was all faux warmth and exaggerated excitement. Dear Lucas, Savannah and I are thrilled to invite you to our dream wedding celebration in beautiful Santorini. Join us for a once-in-a-lifetime experience filled with joy, elegance, and unforgettable memories. So far, it just sounded like Jackson trying to play luxury lifestyle influencer. Honestly, I wasn't shocked that he wanted a destination wedding. The guy used to throw himself birthday parties with velvet ropes and private chefs, and he's the kind of man who uses the phrase personal brand unironically. I figured I'd get the basic rundown, save the date, dress code, venue photos. But then I hit the next paragraph. To enhance the uniqueness of this celebration, we've curated a full wedding guest experience package at just $74,500 per person. The package includes 2 nights in a private villa, gourmet tasting menus from Michelin star chefs, a private sunset cruise reception, custom designer welcome gifts, and access to exclusive entertainment. Travel arrangements are not included. Due to the high-profile nature of this event, all guests must sign a non-disclosure agreement before arrival. I had to stop reading. I reread that sentence about the cost 3 times, thinking maybe it was a typo. Maybe he meant $7,400, which would still be ludicrous but slightly less offensive. Nope, $74,500 for one person, plus my own plane ticket, plus an NDA? I sat there, blinking, trying to figure out if this was an elaborate prank or if I was genuinely being invited to a wedding or a hostile takeover. I stared at my phone for a while before doing the only logical thing, calling my sister Grace. She picked up on the first ring and didn't even say hello. "Did you get that?" she asked. "Already worked up? Tell me you got that wedding ransom note too." I laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that comes from disbelief, not amusement. "Yeah, I just read it. I honestly don't know whether to scream or start a GoFundMe." Grace let out a sound between a groan and a snort. I thought it was a parody at first. But no, Jackson is serious. 74 grand and an NDA? Is he trying to marry royalty or start a cult? "I wouldn't be shocked if there were sacrificial doves or a throne involved," I said. "And I'm supposed to book my own flight on top of that? Where do they think we live, Monte Carlo?" She laughed, but there was frustration behind it. I don't know who Savannah thinks she is, but this is next-level narcissism. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we're forced to bow before her during the vows. I sighed, rubbing my temple. "Have you talked to Mom and Dad yet?" "I did," Grace said. "Mom's trying to spin it like it's a family honor. She called it a once-in-a-lifetime cultural immersion." Meanwhile, Dad said, and I quote, "I wouldn't pay 70 grand to shake hands with God, let alone watch my son marry a woman who makes demands like a movie villain." That sounded exactly like our dad. Blunt, occasionally savage, but rarely wrong. 5 minutes after I hung up with Grace, Mom called. I considered ignoring it, but I knew better. She'd just keep calling. When I answered, her voice was soft, trying too hard to sound cheerful. "Hi, sweetheart. I'm guessing you saw the email." "I saw it, and I still think I'm hallucinating." "Well, I know it's a bit much," she said cautiously, "but this is a very special moment for your brother." "Mom, it's $74,000. That's not a bit much. That's a mortgage." I know," she said quickly. "But Jackson says they're keeping it small and exclusive. So it's not something they can compromise on. It's supposed to be an experience, not just a ceremony." "And the NDA?" I asked. "What's that about?" "Oh, Savannah's being protective. You know how she doesn't want anything posted online before she approves it." "Mom, I haven't posted anything on social media in 2 years. I don't even have the apps anymore." "Well, I just wanted you to keep an open mind. Your dad and I are still talking about it. But Jackson really wants you there." I was already shaking my head. "I'm not going, Mom. There's no scenario where I sell my car or take out a loan just to watch Jackson get married while blindfolded by an NDA." She sighed, and for a moment I heard the weight in her silence. "Okay, I understand. But maybe just think about it a little longer." "I'll think about it," I lied. But even as I said it, I was already done thinking. There was no reality in which I was paying that kind of money to support an overblown fantasy that felt more like a brand launch than a wedding. And if Jackson really thought any of us were going to line up like sheep for this ridiculous spectacle, he was about to learn something real quick. The next morning, I opened the family group chat expecting to see a few polite responses, maybe a couple of relatives pretending to be excited, or some diplomatic questions about the logistics. Instead, it was a digital war zone. There were over 80 unread messages in just the last hour. The chaos was immediate, loud, and gloriously unfiltered. My cousin Elijah, never one to sugarcoat things, had kicked it off with a blunt declaration. This wedding sounds like a scam wrapped in a pyramid scheme. That set the tone, and everyone else followed like hyenas on a carcass. Aunt Ava chimed in next, clearly offended by the extravagance, saying she was personally insulted by the idea that family love needs a price tag. Then Uncle James fired off a message that simply said, "I wouldn't pay 70 grand to be knighted by the Queen, let alone watch Jackson tie the knot with Princess Ego." Every 5 minutes, another person dropped out. Cousins, great-aunts, old friends of the family who barely knew Jackson but were still on the guest list, all of them politely declining or brutally mocking the absurdity. One cousin asked if there was a group rate for therapy afterward. Grace dropped in with, "For that kind of money, I expect to leave with a time machine and a new identity." Somehow, even Grandma weighed in. She typed, slowly and with the punctuation all wrong. "Why do I have to sign a contract? Is there nudity at this party?" It was followed by about 6 question marks and a random pumpkin emoji. That one nearly made me spit out my coffee. I figured Jackson would step in to explain, clarify, or even walk it back a little. But instead, he doubled down. His first message was defensive, saying we were being unsupportive and small-minded. His second message was worse. "If you really loved me, you'd be there. It's not about the cost. It's about being part of the most important moment of my life." That's when Grace replied, "No one said we didn't love you. We're just not rich or insane." He didn't take that well. Within seconds, Jackson was accusing people of jealousy, calling everyone entitled for expecting a free ride. Then he dropped the line that nuked any remaining goodwill. "This is why I don't invite broke people to things." Silence hit the group chat like a brick wall after that message. The kind of silence that feels heavy and permanent. I stared at the screen, eyebrows raised, trying to decide if I should even bother responding. But I couldn't help myself. I typed slowly, deliberately. "So, just to be clear, you're calling your family broke because they won't drop 70 grand on your wedding vacation, and you're somehow the victim in all this." His reply came fast. "I'm not a victim. I just expected better from the people I thought cared about me." That's when the gloves came off. Uncle James came back in with a line that made me laugh out loud. "I wouldn't pay that much to watch Jesus walk on water, let alone watch Jackson get married on a boat in Greece." Aunt Ava said she was sending a gift and nothing more. Elijah posted a meme of someone setting money on fire. Then Grace, ever the queen of pettiness, wrote, "We could take a family trip across Europe for half that cost and still have enough left over for matching tattoos and therapy." Everything was unraveling fast, and Jackson wasn't handling it well. That afternoon, I got the inevitable call. His name flashed across my screen while I was sitting in my car in the grocery store parking lot. I stared at it for a long moment before answering, not entirely sure if I was ready for whatever mess was about to hit. The second I picked up, he launched into a tirade without so much as a hello. "You're being ridiculous, Lucas. You're acting like I'm asking for your soul. This is my wedding, my one wedding, and you can't even show up?" I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "It's not that I won't show up, Jackson. It's that you're charging people more than they make in a year for the privilege. You're treating this like a business launch, not a marriage." His tone sharpened. "You could afford it if you actually planned ahead. You're just making excuses." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "I do plan ahead. That's why I'm not throwing away $74,000 to be emotionally blackmailed into signing a gag order and watching you recite vows like a king on a throne. This isn't about supporting you. It's about the fact that you've completely lost perspective." There was a pause, then a quiet, bitter laugh. "You know what? Fine. Don't come. But don't act surprised when I stop picking up your calls after this." I shook my head slowly, feeling more tired than angry. "You're really going to cut me off over this? Over money?" "No," he snapped. I'm cutting you off because you're selfish." And with that, he hung up. I sat there for a while in the parking lot, staring out at nothing. I wasn't even shocked, really. Just disappointed. I don't think I had truly believed he'd go that far until he did. 10 minutes later, a new message buzzed onto my phone. This time it wasn't from Jackson. It was from Savannah. It started with, "Lucas, I am beyond disappointed in you," and spiraled from there into some unhinged monologue about how Jackson had looked up to me his entire life, and how I was now abandoning him during the most meaningful chapter of his journey. She accused me of being cold, dismissive, emotionally unavailable, and finished with, "You've revealed who you truly are, and it's heartbreaking." I typed a reply. I deleted it. I typed a shorter one. I deleted that, too. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't make it worse, and at that point, I had no desire to make it better. I closed my phone and drove home without buying a single thing from the store. 3 days passed, and I figured the worst of the drama had already happened. My phone had been blissfully quiet, the group chat dormant after Jackson's last meltdown and Savannah's guilt-sprinkled manifesto. But then, just before lunch on a Friday, Grace sent me a message that simply read, "Brace yourself." Below it was a screenshot that nearly made me choke on my sandwich. The guest list had been updated, and when I say updated, I mean gutted. Over half the names were gone. What was once a bloated directory of over 200 family members, friends, and distant acquaintances had been sliced down to fewer than 80. Grace circled Mom and Dad's names in red, then added, "Guess who's not even invited anymore?" Seconds later, a storm rolled back into the group chat. Aunt Ava asked who was still on the list. Cousin Elijah dropped another screenshot and captioned it, "This feels less like a wedding and more like a fire drill with snacks." One uncle asked if refunds were available for the NDA paperwork, which made me laugh harder than I should have. Then came the hammer. Grace texted again, saying, "Mom and Dad officially backed out. They're done. Dad said he'd rather donate a kidney than send a check to Jackson." After that, everything unraveled in real time. Uncle James sent a voice message, he's old school like that, where he loudly declared, "This wedding is a flaming car crash, and I'm bringing popcorn, not a checkbook." Cousin Laura chimed in with, "They're still demanding NDAs? Who are they trying to protect? The Pope?" Then, as if the universe couldn't resist adding fuel to the chaos, my phone rang again. This time, it was Aunt Brenda. She never calls unless something is either on fire or about to be. I picked up, and before I could say a word, she whispered like we were sharing state secrets. "You are not going to believe this, Lucas. The caterers just pulled out." I blinked, unsure I heard her right. "Wait, what do you mean they pulled out?" "They didn't get paid," she said, clearly relishing every syllable. "Apparently, the deposit bounced. They canceled the whole thing." "You're telling me Jackson and Savannah didn't pay for the food?" "Not just the food," she said, her voice gleeful now. "The decorators are gone too. No flowers, no fancy seating, nothing." I was laughing so hard I had to mute the call. This whole event had gone from extravagant to apocalyptic in under a week. And the cherry on top? They had the gall to charge people $74,000 per person while not paying the vendors. A few hours later, Savannah erupted in the wedding group chat like a volcano with a Wi-Fi connection. She sent 6 massive paragraphs full of capitalization, emotional accusations, and dramatic phrasing that could have been pulled straight from a bad reality show script. She blamed everyone, literally everyone, for ruining her dream and sabotaging the happiest day of her life. She even claimed the vendors were pulling out because of family betrayal, not because of bounced payments and unhinged expectations. A full minute after her monologue, another message popped up. "To all of you who bailed, you've hurt us deeply. Your selfishness has consequences. This is your fault." Uncle James, who clearly hadn't had enough yet, replied instantly, "Or maybe they canceled because y'all didn't pay them." Just a wild guess. He was immediately removed from the group chat, which only made the rest of us laugh harder. By the end of that day, it was obvious to everyone the wedding was collapsing like a Jenga tower in an earthquake. Grace called it a high-budget meltdown with a discount ending. I called it the most expensive group text argument in family history. And yet, just when I thought we'd finally hit rock bottom, Jackson found a way to dig. That night, my phone rang again. I didn't recognize the number, but I picked up anyway, half expecting a spam call about car warranties. Instead, it was Jackson. His voice sounded raw, like he hadn't slept. Not angry this time, just exhausted. "You win," he said, skipping any sort of greeting. "I'll pay for everything. Hotel, food, flights. Just get on the damn plane. I blinked, stunned. Wait, you're serious? I'm serious, he snapped, almost defensively. You don't have to pay a cent. I'll cover it all. And the NDA? I asked, already knowing the answer. That still stands, he said, like it was the most reasonable part of the whole disaster. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. So let me get this straight. You called me selfish, cut me off, dragged me through the mud, and now you're so desperate for guests that you're offering to bankroll me, but you still want me to sign legal papers promising silence. His voice tightened. It's not desperation. It's about having family there. That's not how family works, Jackson. You don't bribe people into showing up, and you don't threaten them into silence. You don't understand, he said sharply. The whole thing is falling apart. Mom and Dad aren't coming. The guest list is a joke. Savannah's losing her mind. Do you know what that's doing to her? I rubbed my face, feeling the weight of everything. Maybe if you two hadn't treated this like a coronation, people wouldn't be running for the exits. Silence held for a moment, then he sighed, the sound heavy with guilt or maybe just fatigue. I just need you there. And I just need you to realize this entire thing is madness, I said. And I'm not flying across the world to sit in the ashes of a failed parade. His tone flipped cold. You're making a mistake. No, Jackson. The mistake was planning a wedding no one could afford. Including you. I hung up before he could answer. Within an hour, the family chat was on fire again. Elijah posted another update. Apparently, the venue hadn't been fully paid either. The hotel sent out a final notice threatening cancellation unless the remaining balance was settled immediately. Grace responded with, so they charged us for the Titanic but didn't bother building the boat. Then came a wave of new messages. Cousin Beth heard the planners had quit. Emma confirmed it after speaking with Mom. Jake said the florist had gone radio silent. Aunt Brenda sent another voice message saying the yacht captain walked away, too. This wasn't just a mess anymore. It was a slow-motion implosion, and everyone had front-row seats. But nothing prepared us for what came next. Early the next morning, Grace called, and I could tell something was off in her voice. Not excited, not angry, just stunned. You're not going to believe this, she said slowly. At this point, Grace, I'll believe anything. Savannah gave Jackson an ultimatum. She told him it's either her or all of us. I sat up in bed, the blankets tangling around my legs. She told him to cut off the entire family. She said we're toxic, said we never respected her or supported her vision. And she gave him until midnight to decide. I was silent for a long moment. Then I whispered, this has gone beyond delusion. This is something else. Grace let out a quiet laugh. Honestly, I think she expected him to say yes. We didn't know yet what Jackson would choose. But for the first time, it felt like the wedding wasn't the real issue anymore. It was about control, about power, about isolation disguised as intimacy. The countdown had begun, and we were all holding our breath. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon that night, the family chat had gone eerily quiet. It was the first time in weeks that not a single message had popped up for hours, and the silence felt heavier than any insult or accusation that had come before it. Everyone knew the ultimatum had been issued. Everyone knew Jackson was supposed to decide whether to marry Savannah and cut off his entire family or walk away from everything they'd built together. And no one knew which direction he'd lean until my phone rang at 9:42 p.m. I stared at the screen, recognizing his number instantly, and felt a familiar mix of anxiety and curiosity crawl up my spine. I didn't answer right away. I just watched it ring, half expecting him to hang up before I picked up. But when I finally pressed accept, his voice came through before I could even say hello. I called it off, he said, and his voice cracked in a way that caught me completely off guard. It's over. The wedding's off. We're done. For a few seconds, I didn't respond. I just sat there in stunned silence, trying to process what I'd just heard. You serious? I finally asked, not because I didn't believe him, but because I didn't think he had it in him to pull the plug. I told her I wasn't going to cut out my family, he said, his voice hoarse like he hadn't spoken to anyone all day. She lost it completely, threw a glass across the room, said I ruined her life, called me a pathetic coward, and told me I'd never find anyone who could handle my ego again. I exhaled slowly, unsure what to say that wouldn't sound hollow. What did you do? I didn't fight back, he said. I just listened. I let her yell, let her cry, let her throw whatever she needed to. And the whole time, I felt nothing. For the first time since we got engaged, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel small. I just saw her for what she really was. And what did you see? I asked, already knowing the answer before he said it. Someone who didn't love me, he said quietly. She loved the version of me she could control. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling like it might give me a response. So what now? I asked. You coming home? I'm sitting at the airport right now, he said. I booked a cheap hotel near the terminal. Figured I'd give it a night before deciding anything. I just needed to hear someone else's voice that didn't make me feel like garbage. There was something in his tone that felt raw, like the surface had finally been peeled back on everything he'd been holding together with ego and glitter. Well, you made the right call, I said. It probably doesn't feel like it now, but trust me, man, it was the only sane option left. He didn't say anything for a long time, just breathed quietly on the other end of the line. I let him sit in the silence. Sometimes people don't need advice, they just need to know someone stayed on the call. Before we hung up, I told him I was here if he needed anything. He thanked me, and I could tell he meant it. Then, just as I set my phone down, Grace called me, her voice buzzing with manic energy. Have you seen Twitter? She asked, not even waiting for a greeting. What now? I muttered, already dreading the answer. She's posting. Like full-on meltdown posting. Go look. I pulled up her profile and sure enough, there it was, a dramatic thread starting with, I just want to tell my truth, followed by a long, twisting rant about being emotionally manipulated, gaslit, and pressured into an image she never believed in. She painted herself as the victim of a toxic family, an abandoned fiancé who had been used and discarded by a selfish man chasing approval from people who never loved him. Then came the screenshots, selectively edited text conversations that made Jackson look cold, calculated, and emotionally cruel. I knew the context she'd left out. Grace did too, but most people scrolling through wouldn't. And then, as if the performance wasn't already Oscar-worthy, she posted a link to a GoFundMe. The title? Help me heal from my trauma. The goal? $50,000. The description? A wild story about starting over, rebuilding her peace, and escaping years of mental abuse disguised as love. I sent the link to Jackson. It took him 4 minutes to respond. Let her have it, he wrote. Let her post. Let her beg. Let her pretend. I don't care anymore. Grace, on the other hand, had a field day in the comments. Most people weren't buying Savannah's spin. The replies were savage. People called her out for scamming her own wedding guests, for charging luxury prices while stiffing vendors, and for pretending to be a wounded soul when everyone remembered her demanding NDAs like she was planning a heist. One comment read, maybe sell the $30,000 ring before asking strangers for healing money. Another said, is this the same woman who wanted people to pay 70 grand for a buffet and a boat ride? I was laughing by the time I finished scrolling. That night, for the first time in weeks, I actually slept without checking my phone every 10 minutes. Jackson flew back home 2 days later. He showed up on my doorstep looking worn down but lighter than I'd seen him in years. There was no grand speech, no emotional breakdown. He just said, thanks for not giving up on me, and I nodded like that was enough. He stayed with our parents for a bit, reconnected with some old friends, and slowly started picking up the pieces. He didn't try to explain away what happened or shift blame, he just owned it. And that made a difference. A few weeks after he got home, something strange happened. Savannah got engaged again. It was 3 months after the wedding imploded, and she posted a photo on Instagram of her and some fitness influencer named Noah, holding hands on a rooftop with champagne and a suspiciously familiar-looking ring on her finger. The caption said, "True love finds you when you stop chasing noise." Grace nearly lost her mind. There's no way she met this guy, fell in love, and got engaged in 3 months, she said. She was definitely seeing him while still with Jackson. Has to be. I wasn't sure what shocked me more, the speed of the engagement or how calculated it all felt. I sent the post to Jackson, and his only reply was, let her do what she does. It doesn't touch me anymore. But Grace wasn't done. She went full detective mode and found Noah's profile. The guy was exactly what you'd expect, shirtless selfies, podcast clips about high-value relationships, and captions like, never chase a woman. Make her chase your presence. I almost felt sorry for the guy. Almost. And then, months later, Savannah's engagement exploded, too. She posted another Twitter thread, filled with cries for support and vague accusations of manipulation by someone who weaponized love. She deleted every photo with Noah. The comments lit up again, half sympathy, half mockery. One person wrote, "It's almost like you keep repeating the same drama and expecting applause." A few months after Savannah's spectacular social implosion, Jackson started moving like someone who'd finally cut the weights off his ankles. He got back into a routine: early workouts, weekend catch-ups with old friends, long walks with our dad where they didn't talk much, but it still meant something. He even started showing up to Grace's Sunday dinners without being asked, which might have been the real miracle in this whole story. The man who once acted like family was a seasonal subscription now sat at the kitchen table peeling potatoes like it was therapy. Then one Thursday evening, out of nowhere, he called me with his voice lit up like it hadn't been in years. "I got the promotion," he said, barely able to contain it. "Director of Operations. They gave me the office with the window and a parking spot with my name." I smiled so hard it hurt. I guess that NDA-free lifestyle is finally paying off. He laughed in a way that felt real. "Yeah, and it's funny, I don't even miss any of it. The wedding, the drama, the constant pressure to perform like I was on a damn stage every day. It's like I can breathe again." But the real shift came a few weeks later. He met someone. Her name was Charlotte. They crossed paths at a corporate networking mixer, one of those boring industry things where people pretend to care about quarterly earnings and drink cheap wine out of plastic cups. She was a marketing consultant, had this cool, self-assured energy, and apparently roasted Jackson within the first 5 minutes for using the phrase "thought leader." According to him, that's when he knew she was the one. He introduced her to Grace and me one night at this low-key jazz bar downtown. She wasn't flashy. No designer heels or fake lashes. No icy smile hiding some secret agenda. She ordered a neat bourbon and made fun of Jackson's playlist choices on the way there. I liked her immediately. At one point, while Charlotte was in the restroom, I leaned over and said, "She's different." Jackson nodded, that same quiet smile on his face. "She doesn't need the spotlight. She just shows up." Grace raised her glass. To healthy choices and not needing a legal document to enjoy a wedding. We all laughed, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like we were waiting for something to go wrong. Meanwhile, Savannah's so-called rebranding attempt was going down like a flaming blimp. Her social media presence, once filled with curated brunch photos and humble brag captions, had turned into a messy mix of vague inspirational quotes and sponsored posts for sketchy wellness powders. Brand collaborations that used to flood her inbox dried up. One skincare company even publicly cut ties with her, saying they no longer aligned with inconsistent messaging and personal conduct. Ouch. And then came the money trouble. Grace, who somehow manages to keep tabs on everyone without being a creep about it, called me one night with the gleeful tone of someone about to drop a bombshell. "So, get this, Savannah's parents had to remortgage their house." I sat up on the couch. "Wait, what?" "Apparently, a ton of the wedding expenses landed on their credit cards," she said. "They thought the guest payments would cover it all, but when everyone bailed, they got stuck with everything: decor, vendors, non-refundable deposits. The works." I didn't laugh. Not right away. Part of me actually felt a flicker of sympathy. But only a flicker. "She tried launching some sort of coaching service last month," Grace added. "A self-growth program or something. Literally no one signed up. Karma, it turns out, doesn't run late. It just arrives when you least expect it." But just when I thought we'd reached the end of this twisted saga, the weirdest part landed in my inbox. Jackson forwarded me a message, an actual, formal letter from a law firm representing Savannah. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't a joke. It was real legal paperwork, claiming emotional distress, defamation, and reputational damage caused by Jackson's decision to abandon their shared future in a public and humiliating manner. They were suing for damages. I reread the email 3 times before picking up the phone. "Please tell me this is a really elaborate April Fool's joke," I said. "Nope," Jackson replied, sounding more amused than angry. "She's suing me." "For what, exactly?" I asked. "Embarrassing her on the world stage," he said. "And here's the kicker, her fiancé, that guy Noah, he's funding the lawsuit." I blinked. "Wait, Noah, the influencer guy with the King Mindset podcast?" "Yeah, that one," Jackson said. "Turns out he's not just a rebound. He used to pitch for venture capital funding against me back in the day. We were rivals at the same startup accelerator." It took me a second to connect the dots. So this wasn't just about love. This was about revenge. "Bingo," Jackson said. "They're trying to drag me into court not just to humiliate me, but to bleed me dry." Suddenly, the puzzle pieces clicked. The extravagant wedding, The ridiculous guest fees, the NDA, it hadn't just been a vanity project. It had been part of something bigger, something calculated. Maybe not at first, but it sure as hell turned into a power play. Jackson sighed. Honestly, I don't even care about the lawsuit. I'm not worried. But the fact that they went this far? It just proves I was never the problem. We talked for another hour, not about strategy or legal fees, but about everything we'd survived. At the end, I told him something I hadn't said before. You didn't just dodge a bullet, man. You dodged a whole damn warhead. He laughed, tired but relieved. Yeah, and I'm done trying to rebuild bridges to people who only want to burn them. And that was the last chapter one ever needed from Savannah's story.